Thank you for joining us. My name is Bethany McCorkle. I'm the Communication Director for Ohio Attorney General Dave Yost. We have some important updates and announcements that I'm going to let the Attorney General share. But just for formality of the press conference, we'll let him give some remarks, and then we will open it up for Q&A. If you have questions, let us know in the chat, and then I will individually let people ask their questions. But this time, I'll let you hear it straight from the Attorney General, Dave Yost.
Thank you, Bethany. Good afternoon. This afternoon in Federal District Court for the Northern District of Ohio, the state of Ohio has sued Norfolk and Southern over the February 3rd derailment and subsequent toxic spill that occurred near the village, in the village of East Palestine. This is a 53 count complaint, 106 pages, and looks to hold Norfolk and Southern responsible for their actions. The train derailment caused the release of over 1 million gallons of hazardous chemicals, and it endangered both the health and area residents of the area residents and Ohio's natural resources. Among the things we note in the complaint are Norfolk and Southern's escalating accident rate. It's up 80% over 10 years. And that's a concerning number. At least 20 Norfolk and Southern derailments since 2015 have included chemical spills. This derailment was entirely avoidable, and I'm concerned that Norfolk and Southern may be putting profits for their own company above the health and safety of the cities and communities that they operate in. At least 39 rail cars have discharged substances that have made their way into Sulphur Run, Leslie Run, Bull Creek, the North Fork of the Little Beaver Creek itself, and even the Ohio River, as well as some as yet unknown Ohio waterways. It's interesting, I was a few weeks ago in East Palestine. The village hall is actually built over Sulphur Creek. And while I was in City Hall, I not only heard from employees who said that they had developed sore throats and other irritations. The brief time I was in the hall, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, I too experienced some discomfort. Clearly, at least at that time, Sulphur Run was still had plenty of discharged chemicals in it. There's been damage to the local economy. Citizens obviously were displaced, businesses shut down, and the state seeks to recover the costs, lost taxes, other economic losses. I will note that I'm a happy spot, and I want to thank the media for this. As a small business owner in East Palestine that owns Pizza Joe's. And he told me that in spite of the fact that he's lost most of his Pennsylvania business coming across the border because they haven't been able to get around the roadblocks, the media were buying enough pizza pies in town that they were helping to make up for that shortfall. So let it never be said that the news media doesn't help the local economy. There are numerous violations we allege in this lawsuit, state and federal laws and Ohio common law. The well-known law nicknamed CERCLA, which stands for the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation, and Liability Act, is the chief framework for the complaint. But we also allege violations of Ohio's hazardous waste law, Ohio's water pollution control law, Ohio's solid waste law, and our air pollution control law. In addition, we have common law complaints, first of all, in negligence relating to the defects in the train and the operation of the train. The public law or the common law of public nuisance, which includes the release of chemicals into the air, the public waterways, and the public land. And finally, the common law of trespass to address the contamination of Ohio's precious natural resources. We're seeking injunctive relief, civil penalties, costs, damages, court costs, and maybe more importantly, a declaratory judgment that Norfolk Southern is responsible. We're looking for recovery of costs and damages under CERCLA and Ohio law for our emergency responses, and payment of damages under the common law for our natural resources, property damage, and economic harm to the state and to its residents. We're looking for repayment of costs under common law, including present and future costs incurred by the state in responding to the emergency, providing public services, and preventing future harm to the environment and public health, restoring natural resources, and abating the nuisance. Of course, civil penalties are available under statute, and we're also seeking repayment of court costs. We're asking the court to require Norfolk Southern to conduct future monitoring of soil and groundwater at the derailment location and the areas surrounding it, and a closure plan to be ultimately submitted to the Ohio EPA. Finally, the complaint asks for an order prohibiting and also to refrain from polluting Ohio's waters. The fallout from this highly preventable accident is going to reverberate through Ohioans for many years to come. Big point of this lawsuit is to make sure that those long-term effects are not only not forgotten, but they are redressed. The company has repeatedly said that it wants to make it right. Our lawsuit is designed to make sure that they keep their promise. Yesterday, I met with a contingent of people from Norfolk Southern, including a couple of their lawyers. And I have to say, my office has done battle with industrial polluters in the past where conversations have been anything but productive or cooperative. That was not the tone of the meeting yesterday. Norfolk Southern recognizes that they caused problems in East Palestine, that they've harmed the community and its people, as well as the state of Ohio. And they have expressed privately as well as publicly repeatedly that they want to do the right thing. They threw a few ideas on the table yesterday that I'm very interested in pursuing, including a fund to compensate for long-term losses to real estate values. When I was in East Palestine a couple of weeks ago, one of the things I heard over and over again from folks is, who's going to want to buy my house now? For most of us, a house is the most important and largest investment we have. The idea that it could be damaged or maybe even rendered valueless by this train wreck is disturbing to them, to me, and I am pleased that Norfolk Southern at least recognizes that and feels that they have some responsibility to address that. Also, there's been some discussion about improving the water treatment ability of the village. I think that's appropriate, and looking forward to further conversations. Governor DeWine has been in regular contact with me about this disaster and the state's legal options. One of the things Governor DeWine has asked me several times is how we make sure that there is a way to take care of folks who have long-term health impacts that might not be available right away or noticeable right away, is what I meant to say. And we've seen this happen in other situations. For example, some of the effects of the Desert Storm operation for the Department of Defense, or post 9/11. It was years later before some of the health impacts became apparent. Governor DeWine and I are both extremely concerned that those delayed impacts are also taken care of. And I'm pleased to report that our conversations yesterday with Norfolk and Southern, they recognized that and again have indicated a willingness to put money up toward a fund that will address those long-term impacts. Now, there's a long way between expressing willingness and a final program that is going to adequately address the damages that have been done here. This lawsuit is designed to make sure that Norfolk and Southern keeps their word to the people of East Palestine and the people of Ohio. We're going to pursue those discussions, but we're also going to make sure that the court process goes through and that the obligations are ultimately, whether by judgment or agreement, are enforceable. I want to particularly thank Governor DeWine for his cooperation and openness as we have tried to find facts over the last month. Also in East Palestine, a special shout out to the fire chief, Keith Dravick, who has worked tirelessly to protect his community. On my team, I'd like to thank John Fulkerson and Aaron Farmer, who have led the litigation team that includes Amber Wooten Hartline, Gary Kunkel, Catherine Walker, Greg Bachman, Mark Navarre, Morgan Sterick, and Nora Beatty. I'm really proud of these folks. They have worked nights and weekends trying to get this lawsuit put together and have it well-founded both in fact and in law. We're still finding out what the facts were, exactly what happened, who was responsible. And each day it seems that the picture gets a little bit more complicated, and I'm sure that there are many more facts yet to find. We're working hard to find those answers, to find the facts, to ask the right questions, and that too is part of the court process. Our pledge to the people of East Palestine and the people of Ohio is that we will not draw back, we will not give up, we will not surrender, but we will end in a place where there is justice for the people, for the economy, and for the environment. I'll be happy to take any questions. I'm sorry, I misstated the number of counts in this complaint. It's 58, not 53.
Okay, the first question is from John Bedell with WHIO.
Hi, Attorney General Yost. Given the East Palestine derailment and the most recent one in Springfield, which also involved a Norfolk Southern train that was hauling hazmat, although luckily here in Clark County, none of the cars that derailed had hazmat in them. Are you concerned with Norfolk Southern trains continuing to run through Ohio right now?
Well, look, I think it is important to make sure that we recognize that the railroads, as an industry or any individual railroad, is not the enemy. They're an integral part of the American economy. They move massive amounts of freight safely and cheaply. And we need to make sure that we are looking at the facts as they are. Now, given that issue or that caveat, I would add that I am concerned about an increasing statistic regarding safety where there's more derailments. I think that it's important that we have a national conversation about the things that will make railroads even safer for our communities. And I feel certain there are some things. That being said, railroads of all the railroads are safer than truck transport. And we need to make sure that we're not overreacting
as much as we also need to make sure that we're holding people properly accountable.
Okay, the next question is from Eric Heisek with Law 360.
Thanks for doing this, Mr. Attorney General. The question I had was, I was hoping you could differentiate this lawsuit from I think we're up to about 24 lawsuits that are seeking proposed class action status. Can you tell me the difference between what you're seeking and what they are?
Yeah, thank you, Eric. Good question. So the private lawsuits that represent individual people with individual damages. Our lawsuit is seeking the damages to the state of Ohio, to its environment, to its economy, as well as the broader damage to the people. So these run on parallel tracks, if I can use that metaphor. Neither eliminates the other one or controls. They're about different consequences of the same facts. I'm going to give you a chance, Eric. Do you have a follow-up question?
I do not. The only thing I was going to point out is I believe both are seeking medical monitoring. So I didn't know if there was any conflict with both seeking medical monitoring or some of the damages or some of the relief that both are seeking.
Yeah, I would not call it a conflict. I would say that we're not. There's a concept in the law called offset, and so if in one lawsuit the defendant pays for a set of costs, you don't double dip. You don't get it paid twice for that, and so there would be an offset. Certainly, we're not trying to have two sets of monitoring going on.
Thank you.
The next question is from Tyler Madden with WTOV.
Attorney General Yost, I appreciate you taking the time. You mentioned you're looking to get back damages was incurred to the state through this process. Is there any idea yet on a ballpark of exactly how much that is at this point yet?
Lots, maybe lots and lots. Look, we don't really know that. When we think about tax revenue, that's always in the back rearview mirror. The emergency response costs are ongoing. I'm sure the chief will tell you that his people are still out there. I know the sheriff is still having matters that he has to assign people to, and the police chief. So it's not possible at this point to actually determine how much, but let's not underestimate this. This was an epic disaster, and the cleanup is going to be expensive, and it's going to take some significant dollars to put the people of East Palestine back as close as possible to the position they were before February 3rd.
The next question is from Kylie Gessner with WFMJ.
Hi, Attorney General. Thank you for taking my question. I'm going to pivot just a little bit. What do we know about these women from yesterday's human trafficking raid in Mahoning and Trumbull counties?
Well, that's quite a bit of a pivot. Very pleased with our partners in the Human Trafficking Task Force. This is an ongoing law enforcement operation, and I'm not really prepared to talk about any details at this point in time.
Okay, quick follow-up. So what resources are available for victims in cases like this in general?
So all of our task forces include service components. So when we find a survivor of human trafficking, we try to find out what they need. If that is shelter, clothing, food, we try to link them up with social service providers that can can help them with that. If it's detox or drug treatment, we have partners that make beds available. So we work hard to not re-victimize the survivors of human trafficking who have already endured trauma that will be with them for years, probably the rest of their lives.
All right, thank you.
All right, the next question is from Evan Bush with NBC News.
Thanks so much for doing this. I was hoping you could describe in a little bit more detail what long-term relief you're asking for in terms of medical monitoring, groundwater and soil monitoring. How many years, and maybe just a little bit more detail on that piece of things. Thank you.
Thank you. That is a little bit of a developing target, and let me explain why. This is an unusual kind of aquifer. Now, fair warning, I'm no hydrologist, but it's my understanding that because of the placement of this aquifer, the water behaves differently and is subject to more rapid changes than in other parts of Ohio. We're measuring that and looking at those impacts, and those impacts are what's going to describe how long and how wide and broad we have to be looking at to remediate. Similarly, soil, when I was up there, one of the questions I got asked was, I've got winter wheat in. Does this chemical spill change am I allowed to sell my product? Are farm animals allowed to eat that winter wheat? So that's an example. There's lots of things that we don't know yet. That's why I keep talking about finding more facts. The remedies are going to be fashioned to meet the facts that we find through discovery and further investigation.
The next question is from Lindsay Weber with WLWT.
Good afternoon, sir, and thank you so much for your time today. So back here in Cincinnati in November, city leaders announced a proposed rail sale to Norfolk Southern. Obviously, recent events have raised a lot of concern over citizens. How do you weigh holding accountable Norfolk Southern for public safety versus any kind of future economic development and deals?
Well, I think those are probably two different things. And as the Attorney General, my focus is on getting this disaster cleaned up and maybe participating in the policy discussions about what reforms might be appropriate. Economic development is a matter that's not really the Attorney General's to drive. So I guess I got to stay in my lane and try to fight for justice.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a follow-up question from John Bedell.
Sorry, General Yost, we had a bad audio issue there when I asked you my question earlier. So let me just ask you again, given the East Palestine derailment and the most recent one also involving Norfolk Southern here in Springfield, are you concerned with Norfolk Southern trains running through Ohio right now? And is your office monitoring the cleanup effort here in Springfield, although it did not involve hazmat?
So am I concerned? Yes. When I see a rising accident rate over 10 years, up by 80%, that's not a statistical aberration. And I think we need to take a close look as a society and look at our policy to determine what the appropriate response to that is. Now, that being said, railroad traffic is the safest way to transport cargo. And our nation's railroads are an integral part of the economy, and they move massive amounts of freights every day, year in and year out. So we need to understand what concerns we might have with a rising accident rate in the context of the fact that railroads are still far and away the safest way to transport large quantities of freight.
And are you keeping an eye on the Springfield situation? I know it's different.
The next question is from Daryl Rowland with Channel 6.
Hi, Daryl.
Hi, Mr. Attorney General. You referred to the, I guess it's kind of follow up to the accident rate. You referred to the safety record of Norfolk Southern and also and tell me if I heard it wrong. I thought you said about the performance of the railroad in this crash here. As you probably know, the NTSB has said that the crew itself, at this point, they didn't find them doing anything wrong. So are you talking about the crew? Are you talking about things like those hot boxes, those heat detectors along the railways? I was just wondering if you could elaborate, please.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. We are not talking at this point, have no evidence that the crew on that train did anything wrong. However, we are concerned about operations in a larger sense. The company controls how long the train is, how they staff it, what their response protocols are to rising temperatures that are read by those heat sensors you talked about, and on, maintenance schedules, et cetera. So when I refer to the operational matters, I'm referring more to a broader based set of questions.
Next question is from Deanne Johnson with the Youngstown Business Journal.
Yes, so Pennsylvania's Attorney General has questioned whether or not the controlled burn and release was the right thing to do and whether Norfolk cooperated with officials during the time of the derailment and the subsequent days thereafter. Does your lawsuit in any way discuss that or deal with that in any way? And how much has the state of Ohio had to spend so far, or do you have any idea on cleanup?
Well, secondly, the second question first, I don't have any idea. We are tracking those costs at the state level. And before I logged on here with you, I talked with local officials in East Palestine by phone. And it's my understanding from Commissioner Halleck that they also are keeping meticulous track of what those costs are, but they're ongoing. That meter is running. And so we'll tabulate it at some point, but it hasn't been tabulated yet. With regards to your first question, we're in contact at a staff level between the attorneys general's offices of the two states. I would not want to comment on my colleague's characterization. I will say that those questions you raised are certainly going to be the subject of discovery in our lawsuit. We'll follow the facts and the evidence where they lead us without fear or favoritism.
And I believe this is the last question. We have a follow-up question from Daryl Rowland.
I apologize for the double dip, but Attorney General, I was just wondering, again, you talk about the operations, and certainly in the weeks since the derailment, we've heard all sorts of things. And I've talked to railroad crews and union members that talk about, the braking systems, how their staffing level has been cut, how they have less time to look at to inspect those rail cars before they're put together at the switching yard and sent out on lines that drive through all of our towns. Just all sorts of things like that. I mean, how deep do you plan on probing? I mean, will it get into these sorts of issues?
So to the extent that it reaches the standard of care, yes. But to put a limit on it, we're not invading the collective bargaining agreements between the employees and the railroad. The question is legally, and the question we're interested in is, did the railroad violate a standard of care? Now, some of those things that you've raised from the people you talked with could play into that. Are two people a sufficient crew for a train of this length? And that's a matter that's determined by the railroad operator. And we I see some trains that are even longer than this one. The NTSB, if you didn't notice this, has said that the braking systems were not the problem here, and that if the pneumatic or the electronic braking systems that were under discussion by regulation had been in place, that would not have changed the outcome here. So we're focused on the standard care, and we'll ask the questions that are relevant to that.
Does the scope of your lawsuit cover railroad workers such as those who helped with the cleanup and are now in Ohio, of course, and are now claiming they're sick as well? I mean, are they rolled in under this litigation?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to clarify this. And this goes back to, I think, Eric's question at the beginning. There are private matters that affect only an individual. And those are the lawsuits that have been brought by private lawyers. The Attorney General does not represent individual claims. So an individual person's illness or treatment costs are not part of the state's lawsuit. We're bringing the public interests. Now, there is a small part of that Venn diagram where the public interests and the private interests may overlap, particularly when it comes to a remedy like water monitoring and health monitoring longitudinally. But private actions for individual people are going to remain in the private sector and represented by private lawyers.
And we want to make sure everyone's questions get answered. We do have one follow-up from John Bedell.
General Yost, on the Springfield derailment, the most recent one involving Norfolk Southern, different than East Palestine in that it was hauling hazmat, but none of the cars that derailed had hazmat in them. But is your office monitoring the cleanup and aftermath involving the Clark County train derailment?
We have staff level discussions and are being kept in the loop. In the East Palestine matter, we had a referral from the administration, which triggered our intensive investigation. So there's a coordination level information flow, but I wouldn't say that it's anything like what we're dealing with up in Columbiana County. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and let's go do big good.